Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo on August 11th. August 11th, 2022. Wow, already ripping through this year. In the book of Judges on the morning devotion. You could always check out the YouTube channel right over there at Bo Willette. And we are live on YouTube. Let me check that. Yeah, we're live over there. You can always check out the show at Bo Willette. And it's not so much a show, right, but a devotion. So, hey, Tina, glad you're all caught up and you're ready for Judges chapter 9. Because if you just jump into Judges chapter 9, it might be a little interesting. And you might not know what's going on. Because remember, the Old Testament is a narrative, right? There's a lot of narrative going on. And that's important to know. Some people have never read the Old Testament and they don't really know that. They don't really realize that the Old Testament is that kind of narrative format. It's a story that's going on. And so if you just jump right into it, some people just open up a Bible, right, and just flip open, and man, you might get a little lost, right, because you don't really know the narrative. How are you going to know what's going on in Isaiah's day? The prophet Isaiah, if you haven't read the book of Judges and you don't know what's going on. The book of Judges is really God saying, hey, I'm your king. I'm going to be your king. I'm going to be your ruler. But the people are starting to squirrel, right? They're starting to get all crazy. They're starting to get insecure. Have you ever done that where you get insecure and you get timid and you go, I don't know if I could trust God? And so we look to human beings, right, instead of to the Lord. And the book of Judges is one giant book of kind of humans, specifically the people of Israel, moving away from Yahweh worship and Yahweh devotion and moving to trust in human forms of government as their savior and as their redeemer and as the one who takes care of them and all that. So, man, it's very relevant to our day, right? How many people in our day feel the same way? That people move away from Yahweh, the true and living God, and they move towards other institutions, human made institutions, to govern their life, to govern their morality. So, what dictates their morality is no longer Yahweh, but it's what the government says or what this institution says, right? Instead of looking to God. So we don't want to replace God with anything. So the book of Judges is one giant, if you will, move of breaking the first and the second commandments for sure. So hopefully that gives you an update. Now, one day Gideon's son Abimelech, how many sons did he have? How many sons did Gideon have? Does anybody know? Does anybody remember? Comment corner. Tina, Paula, let's see, Marcia. Does anybody remember? Casey, does anybody remember how many he had? He had a lot. He had a bunch. He had many. Gideon had 70 sons. Remember that? You guys got it right. 70 sons. Well, he had another one too, Abimelech. And this guy Abimelech visited, by the way, popular name. Seems like Abimelech comes up. There's a few Abimelechs going on, more than a few. And so it kind of can get confusing with all the Abimelechs. But this is like, I guess, naming your kid John in a lot of ways. He visited his uncles, his mother, his brothers in Shechem. Shechem, a kind of a divine place, a place of good spiritual kind of background, of course, with some of the people of God. And it says, go talk to the leaders of Shechem. He requested and asked them whether they want to be ruled by 70 kings, Gideon's 70 sons, or by one man, meaning me, your own flesh and blood. So he visits his uncles, his mother, and his brothers in Shechem. And he says, hey, go talk to the leaders and say, hey, do you guys want to be ruled by all these sons of Gideon, or do you want to be ruled by me? You know, isn't that interesting? You know, already there's this power play, right? Gideon's dead, right? The people have already, the last chapter says they've already fallen into idolatry, right? It says that Gideon had a concubine in Shechem, and he also had this concubine to which he had a son named Abimelech. And so when Gideon's son Abimelech visits his uncle, his mothers, and brothers in Shechem, he's going to, in a sense, the family line of his mom. You know, sometimes mixed families can be tough. There's no doubt about it. You know, you have what do we call them? Half sisters, half brothers. That's my this, that's for my first that, and this second, third, that kind of thing. It can get confusing. Just think about Gideon's family, right? Wow, what a amazing mess. 70 sons, then Abimelech. His mom's a concubine. Their family lives in Shechem. He goes over there. And he says, hey, do you want to be ruled by Gideon's 70 sons, or do you want to be ruled by me? So his uncles went to the leaders of the city and proposed Abimelech's scheme. So schematic, a cognitive, way to deceive, a cognitive, organized way to trick. A scheme, right? When you're scheming something, you're pretty involved in the mechanics of it, right? You've planned it out. And it says that the devil, the adversary, right, in Ephesians chapter 6, it says he has schemes against us. Isn't that interesting? The wiles of the enemy, the schemes of the enemy. He's got some stuff again, some things of how to get us too, how to get us off our game. Always getting back to the Word of God, always focusing. So that's what we need to be doing. So here, Abimelech has a scheme, right? Does he really love his dad? Does he really love his brothers? Does he really love his sisters? No, he's totally detached, right? It's about self and it's about power. Power. Why do things happen the way they do in the world? Maybe it's just because of power. People, we love being in places of control and power. And it says, and they decided that since his mother was a native of their town, they would go along with it. They gave him money from the temple offerings of the idol Baal Berith, which he used to hire some worthless loafers who agreed to do whatever he told them to do. So he basically got himself a gang with this money that was given to him. And you know how it is where you get money, you get some clout, some respect, and then you get a little gang with you, right? A little crew to hang out with you. Well, that's what he does. And he takes his crew and he takes them to his father's home in Oprah, right? Different area where Gideon's from. Remember, Gideon's gone at this point, passed away. But he goes back to that hometown, and there upon one stone they slaughtered all 70 of his half brothers, except the youngest, Jotham, who escaped and hid. What a maniac! That's all you could say. Abimelech goes hardcore power hungry and does whatever it takes to gain a following, to be able to usurp control over people, and even in his own family, killing them in a radical way, getting rid of them, moving people away from him so he doesn't have to get into dialogue, so he doesn't have to debate with them. He doesn't have to say, hey, let's talk about the situation. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? Da-da-da-da-da. Which one's better? Let the people decide, that kind of thing. Nope. It's not that. It's we're not going to debate at all. We're not going to talk at all. I'm just going to get rid of you guys. That's what we're going to do. Now, what we hear today is a thing called cancel culture. But cancel culture has always been in the world. This is what Abimelech is doing, is cancel culture. He's saying, you know what? It's not that I have a coherent argument, but what I do have is the ability to raise a ruckus, the ability to damage, the ability to destroy. I have the power and the means to do that, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to destroy everything that gets in my way of my movement, my government, that kind of thing. Whoa, does it sound like today? Absolutely, right? You don't think there's power structures today that aren't really concerned about whether you die or not? That's not the point. The point is to continue their power and their money, right? Money creating power. And getting rid of all the little people, so to speak, so that they can become more powerful, right? It's like the game of Monopoly, man. You try to dominate your field. But in real life, lives are on the line. In real lives, real people, real living beings suffer immensely from the power of others. And us humans just can't get it right. We definitely need saving. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We are a lost race. No equivocally, no debate with that one, right? So they go to Gideon's family, and he takes all of his 70 half brothers, and he executes them, cuts off their heads on one stone. Super bloody. It's hard to read these passages, but it's one thing that's really important in my devotion is really to always remember that the reality of where I live, in the world I live in, that it isn't just a peaceful environment, that there is a lot of hostility. I was driving into work today, and just next to me was a car where a man rolled down a window and was screaming at the car in front of them, like telling them all kinds of stuff. You this, you that, you this. And I was just like, whoa, bro, it's like 7:30 in the morning, man. It's like, woo, you are hyped out. You are pumped up already, ready to go. But there's a lot of hostility. We never know when that hostility will be confronted with it really close to home. But it's scary, right? It's traumatic to go through hostility like this. Then the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo called a meeting under the oak beside let's turn the page. Besides the garrison at Shechem, and Abimelech was acclaimed king of Israel. Whoa, interesting, right? King of Israel, not really. King of the tribe, yeah, probably. Right, there was no king of Israel at this time. Right, Abimelech's probably wanting to take, of course, governorship of his tribe, usurp that kind of authority and power. And when Jotham heard about this, remember, he was the little guy. He was a guy who ran away. Maybe he was one of the little sons of Gideon, and he was able to kind of get out. Maybe he was fast. Who knows? But he was able to get out. Marcia says, a lot of angry bullies on the road today. Drive carefully. Yeah, so true, right? But it's good to know that. Just remember in your heart that, hey, I do live in a hostile world, God. And I just want to remember that help me be peace in a world of hostility. Blessed are the peacemakers. That's right. Let me be a peacemaker. So when Jotham heard about this, he stood at the top of Mount Gerizim. Remember Mount Gerizim? That's from the book of Deuteronomy, where Jesus had a certain group stand on Mount Gerizim. And they shouted across to the men at Shechem, if you want God's blessing, listen to me. Once upon a time, the trees decided to elect a king. First, they asked the olive tree, but it refused. Should I quit producing the olive oil that blesses God and man just to wave to and fro over the other trees, it asked? Then they said to the fig tree, you be our king. But the fig tree also refused. Should I quit producing sweetness and fruit just to lift my head above all the other trees? It asked. Then they said to the grapevine, you reign over us. But the grapevine replied, shall I quit producing the wine that cheers both God and man just to be mightier than the other trees? Then all the trees finally turned to the thorn bush. You be our king, they exclaimed. And the thorn bush replied, if you really want me, come and humble yourself beneath my shade. If you refuse, let fire flame forth from me and burn down the great cedars of Lebanon. Wow, so a little parable that Jotham gives out. Vines, fig trees, very interesting. In your Bible study, you'll kind of come across these parables, and you'll see vines and fig trees, and it might be a really cool thing to look at this one as like kind of the law of first mention in the Bible. It's really mentioning this kind of parable of fig trees, vines, things like that. And you might want to look that up and see if it's relevant to maybe some of the parables that Jesus gave. So that might be a fun little study for you. And so it says, now make sure that you have done the right thing in making Abimelech your king, that you have done right by Gideon and all of his descendants. For my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the Midianites. Yet you have revolted against him and killed his 70 sons upon the stone. And now you have chosen his slave girl's son, Abimelech, to be your king just because he is your relative. So a little bit of favoritism here. So one of the things we could pull out too in the narrative is, hey, let's not show favoritism today. How do I show favoritism? What are ways that I show favoritism? And how can I kind of, turn that favoritism over to God and say, God, help me not show partiality in my judgments. Do I judge everybody the same, or do I judge some people harder than other people? What is my judgment like, on other individuals? So it's a good thing to look at that. We see how this person or this collective group of people from Shechem really looked at Abimelech and said, well, he's, part of the crew, so never mind his character. We're just going to follow him. We're going to choose favorites with him. And so, we always want to be careful about our favoritism. Paula says, since I'm learning the Bible, between what I learn on morning devos and Sunday services, my Bible looks like a notebook. Hey, right on. That's great. And that's good. I'm so glad you got your Bible open, just like me in the morning. You just got your Bible open, kind of looking through it. There's nothing better than just reading through it. Most people don't understand the Bible because they don't actually read through it, right? But when you read through it, it makes total massive sense. You totally start getting it, right? Because it's right there. We're reading through it. So they follow the relative, and they show favoritism. And it says in verse 19, if you are sure that you have done right by Gideon and his descendants, that may you and Abimelech have a long and happy life together. So I love how Jotham says that. Hey, if you guys have done the right thing, then great, go, more power to you, kind of thing. But if you have not been fair, to Gideon, then may Abimelech destroy the citizens of Shechem and Beth Milo, and may they destroy Abimelech. He says, may you guys just implode one another. Right, so a neat kind of parable that's given. The grapevine replied, shall I quit producing wine? That cheers both God and man to be mightier than all the other trees. This idea of a person who boasts above the things that are good. Abimelech not being the good, but boasting that he is above the good. And that's what we humans do. We boast that we are above the good. And the greatest good is God, right? The greatest good is God. And how can I boast above God? How can I boast and say I'm better than God? I'm greater than God. Sometimes in discussions, sometimes the best thing to say is, hey, what do you think about God? And what do you think about the revelation of God through Jesus of Nazareth? And if they say, well, I don't believe that, I don't believe this, I don't believe that, well then, okay, you don't believe that, but then who do you believe? You? Do you believe the professor at the university? Is that who you're putting everything in? What do you believe? Who are you trusting? Are you putting yourself up above the grapevine? Are you putting yourself up above the trees of Lebanon? That kind of idea. Are you boasting, right? Oh, thank God our salvation is not by works, or else we would boast. Oh, I am so good. Oh, I am such a good person. Oh, I woke up and I did a devotion. It's so horrible. Oh, yeah, but what is in my mind all the time? What do I have to battle all the time? What is my actions like? What is the greed and the envy and the strife and the manipulation and the deceitfulness and all the yuck that is within me? Do I know that well enough to know that I shouldn't be putting myself in any way above the cedars of Lebanon or above the grapevine? That kind of idea. Human beings today have lost their understanding of their depravity. And because they've lost their understanding of their depravity in lieu of God, they, in a sense, have exalted themselves to deity. Humans are just now fighting over who is the loudest authority to listen to. And that's what tyrannical governments and tyrannical people, that's what it's all about. Crazy. Casey says, I could see the favoritism. Christians not exempt. Laugh out loud. Yep, so true. I know I've fallen into that too. God reminds me that it's what he believes about me and what he sees. I'm allowing him to change me and what needs to be changed, and leave others up to him. That's right. That's so good, right? Yeah, we have enough. Sufficient is the evil of today, right? So we got to deal with that in ourselves, right? Sufficient is what we got in front of us, right? I can't look to everything else. But I see a lot of how the world is through the story, the narrative of Abimelech. I see how groups and governments and things like that fashion themselves, power, people that are into power, and how they will gain that power no matter what. They will do everything to preserve that power no matter what. You see how Abimelech links with his family line. He does it for his family, his lineage, so to speak. His family lineage looks to him as being a part of them, and they're in it together. This kind of thing. Sometimes money has long family trails into history. So you see a lot of cool stuff, I think, in here. Jotham, after his prophetic message to them, his parable, Jotham escaped and lived in Beer, for fear of his brother Abimelech. 3 years later, 3 years go by. He got through junior high, right? God stirred up trouble between King Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. Notice what it says. God stirred it up. Ooh, God stirs it up. What an interesting thing. Hey, what is God going to stir up, right? Maybe God's stirring up stuff. It says, in the events that followed, both Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, who aided him in butchering Gideon's 70 sons, were given their just punishment for these murders. For the men of Shechem set an ambush for Abimelech along the trail at the top of the mountain. Isn't that sad? Those that were once with them, that propped him up, now are against them. Ooh, politics, right? We're for you, we love you, we love you, love you, we hate you, we hate, we hate you, we hate you, right? It's a love-hate relationship. And it says, but someone warned Abimelech about their plot. So Abimelech got word about their plot to kill him. At the time, Gaal, son of Ebed, moved to Shechem with his brothers, and he became one of the leading citizens during the harvest feast at Shechem that year, held in the temple of the local god. The wine flowed freely, and everyone began cursing Abimelech. People were drinking, having a blast, worshiping their gods, and people began cursing Abimelech. Who is Abimelech? Gaal shouted. And why should he be our king? Why should we be his servants? He and his friend Zebul should be our servants. Down with Abimelech. Make me your king, and you'll soon see what happens to Abimelech. I'll tell Abimelech, get up an army and come out and fight. Isn't this amazing? All of a sudden you have people that, at one point seemed to be cool. Next thing you know, 3 years later, everybody looks at you and thinks you're lame and that you're some idiot that don't know anything. So sad, right? So finicky how us humans act. But when Zubal, the mayor of the city, heard what Gaal was saying, he was furious. He sent messengers to Abimelech in Arumah, telling him, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to live in Shechem, and now they are arousing the city to rebellion against you. Come by night with an army and hide it out in the fields, and in the morning, as soon as it is daylight, storm the city, and he and those who are with him will come out against you, and you can do with them as you wish. So Abimelech and his men marched through the night and split into 4 groups, and it goes into their military kind of thing, right? And when Gaal saw them, he exclaimed to Zebul, look over at the mountains. Doesn't it look like people coming down? No, Zebul said. You're just seeing shadows that look like men. Maybe you've been drinking too much, buddy. No, look over there, Gaal said. I'm sure I see people coming toward us. And look, there are others coming alongside the road past the oak of Nim. Then Zebul turned on him triumphantly. Now, where is that big mouth of yours? He demanded. Who was it who said, who is Abimelech, and why should he be our king? The men who taunted and cursed are right outside the city. Go on out and fight. So Gaal led the men of Shechem into the battle and fought with Abimelech, but was defeated. And many of the men of Shechem were left wounded all the way to the city gate. Abimelech was living at Arumah at this time, and Zebul drove Gaal and his relatives out of Shechem and wouldn't let them live there any longer. The next day, the men of Shechem went out to battle again. However, someone had told Abimelech about their plans. So he had divided his men into 3 groups, hiding in the fields. And when the men of the city went out to attack, he and his men jumped up from their hiding places and began killing them. Abimelech stormed the city gate to keep the men of Shechem from getting back in, while his other 2 groups cut them down in the fields. The battle went on for days before Abimelech finally captured the city, killed its people, and leveled it to the ground. The people at nearby town of Migdal saw what was happening and took refuge in the fort next to the temple of Baal Berith. Now, I like reading this section. I know it seems like a lot, but let me just say this. When power gets in there, it has to fight to retain its power, right? That's what we have to do. When we're the big kid on the block, we have to fight to keep that status of being the big kid on the block. And it means that every day is a constant contention, a constant wondering, what battles am I going to fight now? Who's going to come against me? This is the life that Abimelech he's reaping. This is the kind of life that Abimelech is reaping, because this is what he sowed. He sowed violence in his life and not caring about people, but caring about power and position. And that's now the way he is. Every day is a day of struggle, violence over people, everything like that. And this is how we are as human beings. This is a human behavior, right? We do reap what we sow. This is a principle in the Bible, right? If you do sow that seed of contentious violence, strife, hatred, then you are going to reap that as well in your life. And that's what he's doing. And every day can be a battle, again, because you just never know who's going to come at you now. Who wants to fight you now? There's always someone else that wants more power, wants the power that you have. And this is what we see all the time in the world. Constant people in power, killing massive amounts of people. The amount of millions and millions of people that have been killed by giant power groups is unreal. If you added it all up, you'd be absolutely blown away how many people died because of just a lack of love, a lack of compassion. And it's sad. It burdens our heart to know, God, that's how we are. It's so yucky. Again, it points us to the need of salvation. God, help us to walk humbly and you be our God, that we look to you, that we do need you, that we don't have the answers, that we are lost without you. Do we see our desperation? That's what you see in this chapter, don't you see it? A desperation. Abimelech, desperate. Shechem, desperate. Absolutely lost. And it's so sad. Abimelech learns of this again, and he led his forces again. And it goes on. Next, in verse 50, Abimelech next attacked the city of Thebes and captured it. However, there was a fort inside the city, and it keeps going on. But as Abimelech was preparing to burn it, a woman on the roof threw down a millstone. It landed on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull. Abimelech finally gets killed by a woman on a roof, throws down a millstone, it lands on his head, and it busts his head open. Kill me, he groaned to his youthful armor-bearer. Never let it be said that a woman killed Abimelech. So the young man pierced him with the sword, and he died. Then his men saw that he was dead. They disbanded and returned to their homes. Thus God punished both Abimelech and the men of Shechem for their sins in murdering Gideon's 70 sons. So the curse of Jotham, Gideon's son, came true. Man, what an end, right? So what Jotham said did come true. What God says will come true in this world, right? This world will burn. It will burn up. It will eat itself alive. We will kill one another. It's just super sad to see this. But that's what this narrative points out, right? It points out all the craziness that's within us as human beings and what we see today in the uprising of these, these central movements, these big movements that want to gain a lot of power and create fear and create situations and create solutions. But it's all, and they have to continue, the world has to continue in this way over and over and over and over and over to continue that power. The only way it's going to stop is if everybody just took their hands off the wheel and said, hey, we're no longer into the power. We're no longer into this. We're no longer going to do these things. And I'm going to relinquish my power. I'm going to sell everything I have. I'm going to give to the poor. But we can't do that. We go, no, I don't want to sell everything I have and give to the poor. I don't want to do that. I want my power. I want my position. Those type of things. So Jesus shows us we definitely need salvation. Woo, what a chapter, right? We really see that reaping, sowing this morning. and we see it in Abimelech's life. It's something we should pay attention to in our own life as well this morning. So, Lord willing, tomorrow we'll get into chapter 10, a little shorter chapter, and but another good one. So you guys take care, okay? Have a great day. Bye-bye.